Hi everyone. I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. Welcome to the Digital Inclusion Workshop by LookUp. I'd like to start by introducing LookUp. LookUp is a non-profit organization which aims at educating people about the importance of tech-life balance, digital well-being, and ethical technology. We are working towards empowering the youth to solve some of today's toughest problems, all accelerated by a new world of technology. And we use their personal experience as fuel for real change. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Vishal Kumar, for the workshop. Vishal is currently an HR consultant in Shell and has been active in leading accessibility and inclusion efforts for persons with disabilities. Vishal was forced to abandon his studies after class 9 due to his steadily deteriorating eyesight, and he is left with almost no eyesight now. He was later able to resume his education with the help of assistive technology and support of volunteers. He is an alumni of IIM Lucknow, and he's an amazing percussionist and can play 6 musical instruments. He's a passionate mountaineer and has trekked to Mount Everest Base Camp. His initiatives towards empowerment of persons with visual impairment have been recognized by the late President of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam, and he has been awarded a national level award for the same, which is the NCP Emphasis Public Policy for Universal Design Award. On the whole, from a school dropout, Vishal has bounced back with full force and exhibited tremendous transformation. Today, he is here to talk about different disabilities and how accessible technology has been a major driving force for the inclusion of persons with disabilities. Before I hand it over to Vishal, I would like to ask you all to keep your mics on mute. And if you have any questions, you can type it in the chat box, and we'll take it up wherever it's feasible. At the end, we will have a question and answer round where you can unmute yourself and go ahead with your questions. The stage is all yours, Vishal.
Thank you, Anshi, and thank you, the entire Lookup team, for having me here. Hi, everyone. Very happy to talk to you today. The next few minutes, we will deep dive into understanding a little about what disability is, uh, what are some of the types of disabilities, and how do they interact with the environment. Uh, how understanding them can make a difference in understanding ourselves better and being a better and more productive individual as a whole. Yeah, because if there is a disability and people are able to strive and thrive with disability, it just means that there are better ways to live as well, right? So that's something we will explore, and we'll also explore how some of my experiences has made me a better person, and so as with many other people with disabilities. So as and when you have questions, feel free to type it, and she will help us moderate that for us. And hope you have a good time with me. Okay, let's start with the question, just to understand. When you think of disability, when you hear the word disability, what comes to your mind? What kind of emotions get triggered? In one word, if you could type it. Especially abled.
Okay.
Okay. What else? Fear. Okay. I'll ensure the fear doesn't exist after this session. Not able to. Okay. Strength. Okay. keep those responses coming in. Yeah, so right from PowerPoint to uh, so there are emotions on the positive side as well as on the negative front, and that's true with every individual, right? So let's understand disability a little more, and then we'll see if these emotions that uh, we typically have, uh, what what does it mean, and should it mean something else? Okay, so disability can be a permanent disability, a temporary disability. Let's say you met an accident and there was a fracture. You might have experienced people around with that kind of scenario, right? There is an injury and so on. Or it can be a situational disability, which is what most of us do not recognize and really understand as a disability. What is situational disability? Let's say you are in a mall, both your hands are full with the excited shopping that you have done, uh, and you have to come out of the mall, and it doesn't have a uh, watchman to open the door or a security person. You need help there, right, to get out of the place, to help for the door to be opened for you. That is situational disability. You might say, Vishal, you are stretching it too far. I'll come to it in a while. What I am trying to convey by bringing in the situational disability. Just stay with this. Yeah, temporary, permanent, and situational. Most of us, when we hear and think about disability, we associate with uh, permanent disability. So, permanent disability, again, it can be a visual, hearing, speech, locomotor. Locomotor can be with one of the limbs or multiple limbs. Yeah, so maybe difficulty walking or using hands or dexterity in terms of being able to use your fingers or being able to type, etc. And cognitive disability. Yeah, cognitive disability is one of those we understand the least. It includes learning disabilities. It includes it has various types, and it can be neurodiversity, which means certain nervous disorders like cerebral palsy. Yeah, is there any question? Okay, if there is none, you could stay on mute. That will help in keeping this session a little better. Okay, so all these types of disabilities, how do they interact with the environment? Have you heard of assistive aids or technology uh, in terms of how do people with some of these disabilities that I just spoke of, how do they interact with them? What kind of technology do they use? How does a blind person operate computer? I cannot see the screen. I cannot see all of you, but I'm able to use the laptop. Any reflections? Braille, okay. Braille is one of the screen reader is exactly what I'm using now, Anshi. Yeah. Anything else? Think of other disabilities also. Yeah, which talk out the text. That is what a screen reader exactly, and that is what I'm using right now. Ah, exactly. That's why I turned on the captions just before the session started, right? So those who cannot hear, it is it translates your voice into text so that they cannot hear, but they can see the text. Yeah, so subtitles and captions are not just meant for watching movies in different languages. Yeah, so that is a discovery which people had. after the captioning technology was introduced for people with hearing impairment. You are all being benefited. Watching those Korean movies, yeah. Speech to text and text to speech, exactly. So speech to text, we also have speech to action. Yeah, that technology was introduced for people who cannot use their hands to operate computers or phone. And see how well we adapt. And yeah, the technology was introduced for um, people who cannot use their hands to operate computers or limbs. But now all of you use the same technology day in, day out, be it as Google Assist, Siri, Alexa. It's all based on speech to action technology. Yeah, even Cortana for that matter. Yeah, so that's what assistive technology and that's what uh, solutions for people with disabilities does. When we think of solutions for people with disabilities, it stretches our imagination to create solutions that can be usable by all, usable by wider set of people in wider set of scenarios. Yeah, so that is why I was talking about scenarios when we started with types of disabilities. So this the scenarios where uh, there is situational disability. When we think of solution for people with disabilities, uh, those solutions are suitable for even a person who is not legally termed as a person with disability, but helps a lot in the situational disability angle. For example, in the same example that I gave, you're full of both hands are full of bags and you cannot open the door. That's when people thought of introducing something called as universal design. What's universal design? How can your solution be made accessible and inclusive to the widest set of people in widest set of scenarios? Yeah. Now that door which needed help for a person to open, what we did, we made it a censored enabled door. Yeah, so the moment there is a moving object around the door, sensor will detect and it will open the door. Yeah, and that is what is universal design. Yeah, it is so universal and inclusive that even it's inclusive even for a pet, right? So always think of solution that can be usable by widest set of people by applying this universal design. You can explore more. There's enough material to understand how do you uh, have universally designed products and services. And it's not about just products, it's about everything you create, be it a document, be it an experience, be it an event, a session like this, or a building that you construct for yourself or for somebody else, right? So everything we create, don't think whether uh, it will be whether there is a need. I'll tell you what is the need. Any idea how many people with disabilities globally? Any responses? You could type it on the chat box. Globally, 10%. Okay. Any other responses? 10%. No, oh, 10%. Only 10%. No, I'm having fun. Don't worry. Yeah. See, just my tone made you change your response. 20% now. Okay. Okay. So different research give different numbers, but the latest one that has come in globally is around 20%, 19 to 20%. 1.3 billion people with disabilities globally. You might wonder, okay, where are they? Yeah, yeah, absolutely, it's huge. And you might wonder, where are they? Yeah, I don't see them around. Uh, how do you justify? The reason you don't see them around is the kind of environment we have created for them. Yeah, the environment is not inclusive and accessible enough for most people with disabilities to come out and have an independent life or an inclusive experience. Yeah, so many are confined with their families at home, and that's where there is a huge opportunity. We as individuals or as the future for India can contribute in transforming lives. Yeah, so there are people, one odd cases or a few decimal percentages of people who have managed to thrive and strive well, but there are many more who are able to get into education, which was not the case earlier. Get a bit into employment, but still there is a lot that we need to do. Yeah. So just to share a little background about myself, I come from a place called Bellary in Karnataka, and uh, 3 out of 4 in my family have visual impairment. I'm the youngest, and all 3 of us had to discontinue our studies because of lack of awareness. Awareness about the assistive technologies that we just spoke about, awareness about government facilities. For example, anybody who wants to write an exam, there is a provision to uh, get you a scribe who can read it for you, read the question for you, and write what you dictate to them. Yeah, or certain inclusive policies that help you certain rights for education and so on and so forth. I never thought of studying beyond ninth at one point. Yeah, forget about MBA. For 3 years, I was out of school, dropped out, and never even imagined of being able to study beyond that because I had no clue how to do it. Similarly, my brother didn't study for 7 years. My sister didn't study for 12 years. And John's chance brought me to Bangalore. I learned using screen readers, and that's when I discovered the world. And discovered once I learned using internet, I could browse and explore how people are able to cope and live with the disability. Yeah, still the level of awareness was low. Yeah, that was one area. Second is the mindset. Yeah, the people. Uh, Many have a mindset. The belief is a person with disability cannot do a lot of things. Yeah. So the first emotion that is triggered when there is a person with disability is negative. Negative can be sympathy, or yeah, it can be even be demeaning at times, uh, or sometimes it's neutral and empathy. Yeah, which is okay. Yeah, it's whatever based on their backgrounds and based on what they believe and hear about disability, right? So that's as the awareness improves, the that changes to what can be done and how you can enable them to strive. So there were few volunteers, NGOs who enabled me, and many hands made me what I am today. And many are not able to get that kind of support uh, even today. Yeah, so 3 years I didn't even imagine of studying further. After moving to Bangalore, after learning computers, is when I thought of studying beyond ninth and resumed my education, right? And When I was in BCom, the thought came in, how do I study further? Yeah, the typical question, okay, what next? And that's when I started thinking of doing an MBA. I had no clue uh, what needs to be done for an MBA, what kind of colleges. And I was having a normal chat with a friend and asked him, okay, what do you do to do an MBA? He said nothing. Don't worry. You just have to write a CAT exam, and you clear, and you can do your MBA. I said, great, yes. It's so simple. He said, yeah, you just need to. There are three papers: English, quants, and uh, math. Of course, quant and math, data interpretation, whatever. And at the moment I heard math, I was taken aback because I had not studied math for 9 years, uh, uh, or not studied properly for 9 years. So I was literally demotivated. But then I said, okay, I had made up my mind. If I had to do MBA, I will do it from one of the best institutes. Otherwise, I'll not do. So once I decided, I thought, okay, you have decided. There is no other way out. You have to start off at max. So I literally started with third standard of math, third standard math book, and from there it took a lot of effort, a lot of support as well. And the very first exam I wrote to test where I stand in terms of CAT exam. There was no accessible material then. When I started, there was hardly any support. So imagine studying, but not being sure of books that you can read on your own. So you had to depend on volunteers. Uh, I would travel for 30 kilometers a day uh, to get help to have somebody read out for me. But when I started, the very first mock exam I gave just to test whether uh, before even starting preparation, right? Can you guess how much I scored? Any wild guesses in the very first mock exam before preparation? Oh, 90 percentile. Wow, 95. I scored minus 10. Yeah, minus 10. Yeah, that was my reaction. Oh my God. But anyways, I had decided, and I thought, okay, whatever is the situation, at least I know the reality where I stand. I put in whatever needed to be put in, and with all the support and God's grace, I cleared. I got into IIM Lucknow. In IIM Lucknow, I was among the first ones, or they had not experienced a person with disability, and it was a journey again there for the campus to understand, to make their policies inclusive, there to make the uh, again to make the accessible material available for them. Yeah, it was a journey in itself. Yeah, so why I'm sharing this is uh, that's the kind of background most people with disability have because of the lack of exposure, and it requires a lot of effort and support, uh, especially at that phase. And of course, as you go along, the whole environment needs to be made accessible. So when I went into work, so I after completing MBA, I got into Tata Motors. That's where I worked first in Mumbai, and I was in a dilemma. I was offered a role in Bangalore, where my family lived by then. They had moved. But I decided to live independently and thought of having an experience of uh, living alone independently, because it was a difficult decision, especially for my parents, because they were worried living all by myself in Mumbai is not something they could digest easily. But thankfully, I had uh, uh, open team, and they agreed to give me a role in Mumbai itself. And I was a manager there, and then I was the project lead for deploying HR analytics in for entire Tata Motors. And in that process, I also experienced living independently in Mumbai, right from traveling by local train to managing my household tasks on my own, uh, to having fun, having a group. And that's when I also joined Blind Graduates Forum of India, an NGO, and we work on accessibility, awareness, supporting research, supporting people who think of solutions for people with disabilities. Yeah, so that was another liberating experience, which many don't get. Yeah, so that's and chance brought me to Bangalore when I got hired by Shell. I'm currently an HR consultant in Shell, and the processes, the whole thought process that has changed over the last few years of hiring a person with disability has seen a drastic change in many companies. Yeah, so people now recognize the value people with disabilities bring in. What value do they bring in? Imagine a person who has gone through the kind of challenges that I described. At every stage, you have to convince people that you can do something. At every stage, there are negative perception about you. At every stage, people have low expectations from you. Yeah, and it's for anybody to grow, it's very, very important to have expectations from them. Yeah, you stop expecting, they will lose the motivation to do anything in life, right? Yeah, so unless you have that inner strength and motivation, uh, that becomes a challenge. All these situations teach you certain things. Yeah, so there are certain qualities you develop by facing these kind of situations. So whenever you face hardships, what we do, we wish those hardship get away soon, right? And it's natural feeling and natural expression. And of course, nobody wants anybody to face hardships. But whatever is the scenario, if you are facing any hardships, also recognize that it is making you stronger from within. Yeah, if you have that perspective in mind, you will be able to cross that phase much better. Yeah. So now I don't get scared of situations that I used to earlier. Yeah, I don't get stressed out of very trivial things that I used to get stressed earlier. Yeah, because I have faced bigger challenges. So that's what it prepares you for. Yeah, so that's what even employers recognize. Yeah, employers look for certain qualities among leadership, and people with disabilities acquire those qualities very early in their phase due to whatever they experience on day in day out, right? And it's natural for them. For example, as simple as if I shifted my house recently, and we were organizing in my house, you will always find things very well structured, very well organized, and never cluttered. Yeah, you will find things at its right place. Yeah, I know it is not something that everybody would enjoy doing, but that's also a quality that you develop, because if it is kept in the right place, it's easy for me to find. So I will ensure I stick to the process, I stick to the structure, and that comes out even at work. Yeah, I think of structure very naturally, I think of processes very naturally, and that is what. So if you give me a very complex unstructured environment, very naturally without thinking I'll make it structured and simple. Yeah, so that's because of the kind of experience we uh, observe day in day out. So the emotion, again coming back to the very first question that we had, right? So negative emotion about a person with disability. Disability is uh, one of the many attributes of an individual. Yeah, so the person can be tall, short, fair, dark, uh, active, calm. These are all qualities about an individual. Similarly, a person can have a disability, cannot have it, and do not have a disability. It is a difference. Yeah, the person is different. Each of us are unique, and disability is one of the kind of uniqueness. And it is one of the many hundreds of billions of attributes. Yeah, we have billions of cells in our body. Each cell signifies certain quality about ourselves. Yeah, that's if those who recognize DNA and what the DNA is meant for, genes, etc. Right? And disability is just one of them. But when it comes to conversation, we tend to place so much of importance and so much of uh, attention towards one attribute, uh, which we need not. Where it needs to be done, yes, we do, and move on. Yeah, so keep it simple. Let's pause here and see if there are any questions or any reflections. So I would suggest you could type your questions on the chat box, or if there are any comments, of course, you've been commenting. Anything that makes you curious. We spoke of many types of disabilities. Okay, so while you key in those questions, we will take those in a while. Let's move on a little and switch gears. We understood the types of disability, how they interact with the environment, what kind of background they go through, or what kind of situations many of them go through. What can we do as individuals? Yeah, we also understood what we can acquire from them, right? What we can learn and observe from them with the kind of experience they have, right? So, what you can do as an individual or the organization or the institute that you represent. Firstly, think of three things: accessibility, inclusive environment, and an open mindset. Now, what's accessibility? Very first thing. Accessibility is simple. Anything that you want, you create, is a person with disability able to access? Yeah, is a person with disability able to use it? Yeah, be it a website, be it an application that you develop, be it an analytics dashboard that you create, uh, an AI model that you build. Do you take inputs and needs from this community? Yeah, remember. How can society? Okay, I'll come to that question. So, be be it a website, a document, for example. How do you make it accessible? How do you ensure their needs are incorporated and they are able to use it? Many of you are into AI ML. How do you ensure uh, your models are inclusive? Yeah, because if you take historical data for any analysis which doesn't have voice of a person with disability, it will give you a skewed result, right? So that representative sample or the representative data is very critical. Yeah, if that data doesn't include certain attributes or certain representation from remember 20% of people, right? Almost 15 to 20%. Yeah, you look at different sources of data. 50 to 20% of them, if you miss out, then the model will be skewed absolutely, and so your insights, your output, everything will be skewed. So how do you make all of it accessible? You there are certain accessibility standards. Yeah, for example, for websites and applications, you have web content accessibility guidelines. You could just search for WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. 2.1 is the latest one, and it gives you simple steps of how do you create a website which is going to be simpler for everybody to use. That's the benefit of you adopting these standards. It is not just meant for people with disabilities, it's meant for all kinds of user. Yeah, so for example, if you put in an image, uh, describe the image so that a person who using screen reader is able to read it, because it the screen reader can identify text but not images. Similarly, use contrast colors. So for those who have low vision, if you have sufficient contrast in the background and the text, it becomes easier. The font size, the uh, if there is a video content, ensure there is a subtitle, there is captioning, and captioning even for the uh, content that is in audio. For example, there is a background music being played. A person who is listening will not understand there is a background music being played, right? So you can put that in the caption. Yeah, peppy music being played, melodious music being played, and they'll be able to relate to the emotion. They'll be able to yeah, understand what's happening in that pause. Yeah. So such standards, when you adopt, you will be able to make your tools more accessible. Websites, your application, for example, you're creating an app. uh, Many of the apps do not have buttons that are labeled. Yeah, if there is no label for the button, for the screen reader user it will say unlabeled button, so you don't know what that meant, what the button is meant for. Yeah, so it's as simple, it's just one line code that needs to be included to make that particular action, that particular feature accessible. But since we are not aware or not prioritize this group, we tend to miss out. Yeah, so like Rijul said, yeah, if there is no title assigned for the page in the HTML page that you create, the user will not know what the page you are on. And it's not just meant for a person with visual impairment or a disability, right? Even you will get confused for a while what that page is meant for unless there is a title. Yeah, that's what these standards does. Similarly, documents. All of us create Word documents, presentations, Excel documents, emails. There are accessibility guidelines now. It's become so simple to adopt those. It's like a spell checker. Yeah. So next time when you create a document, uh, find something called as accessibility checker. It's mostly there in the review menu. Yeah. What it does is whatever document you've created, it will scan your document and tell you how many accessibility gaps that are there in your document, and it will tell you how to fix it. Yeah, so if you spend a little bit of time understanding that, it will tell you there's not insufficient contrast. It will tell you there is a image without alternate text to it, so on and so forth. So if you ask me one takeaway from this conversation, go and spend some time understanding how to create accessible documents. Yeah, explore and understand using accessibility checker in MS Office. Okay, so let's move to the next one, inclusive environment. When we say inclusive environment, it can be uh, a classroom, an educational institute process, admission process, or the entire course curriculum. It can be employment in terms of the kind of policies you create, the kind of procurement you do, or it can be your own business that you will build, your startup that you will build in the near future. How do you ensure the needs of people with disabilities are incorporated? Yeah. So what are some of the things you can do? Talk to people with disabilities. That's the first thing, right? Ensure you talk to them, understand what they need. Yeah. If it is a classroom, uh, or a presentation or a meeting that you're organizing and presenting on something on the board or a present PPT, ensure you verbalize it so that a person not watching can understand just by listening to your conversation. Yeah, so don't leave for people to see and process the information. Don't say take this from here and put it there. What is this? What is here? What is there? A person who is not seeing will not understand, right? So you make it uh, verbalize it so that it's descriptive enough for them to understand. Similarly, uh, if there is a person with uh, if there is a person with hearing impairment, ensure you face them. uh, they're able to see you, they are able to many of them do lip reading to follow the conversation, right? Yeah, so some of them converse through chat. Yeah, so you can chat with them. Some of them need closed captioning that is there in many of these uh, web conferencing platforms nowadays. Turn on your captioning when you have any meeting. Don't assume that people uh, who will attend from a person with visual hearing impairment, right? We don't know. Out of even this participant, there will be many people who will not know. Yeah, we don't know whether they can hear clearly, or they are in a noisy environment, as simple as that, or I'm not talking clearly. Captioning helps in processing the information better. Yeah, similarly in a work environment, um, you ensure you have your policies that are inclusive. Provide assistive aids like screen readers, magnifiers, etc., so that the employee can be as impactful as anybody else. Your procurement, whatever you procure to build your own product or to run your business or to run your operations, ensure you procure where the tools are accessible. Yeah, because procurement decisions cannot happen every day, right? It's a long term decision a lot of times, especially technology. Yeah, so many organizations today uh, ask for accessibility, and only if you're making your tools accessible, you will be able to sell for a wider sector of people. Yeah, so equally important for you to create solutions that are accessible and inclusive. Yeah, so the last dimension that I spoke of, we spoke of accessibility, we spoke of inclusion. The third one is mindset. uh, just keep one simple thought in mind. uh, Everything is comes down to one thing. Yeah, every individual is unique and they bring their own strengths. Yeah, while there are opportunities for every individual, what you need to focus is how do you leverage on the strength, the kind of experience people had, and how you can utilize that to get a better understanding of representation from 20% of the global population or 15% of the global population, right? So recognize that, yeah, and that's what I leave you with, and we can take some questions before we close. Arshi?
Yes, that was an amazing talk. I am already inspired. And as a developer, I must say there were a lot of more perspectives that you opened my eyes to, and I will definitely keep that in mind next time I'm working on some product.
Thank you.
So, guys, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask. Uh, Although, Vishal, there are some questions which I think in the chat box which were missed. Do you want to go
Yeah,
over
please.
them?
Yeah, please, you could
So the
quick
first question is, how can society, especially the Indian society, be more inclusive of kids with autism spectrum disorder?
okay. Great question. I may understand little about autism spectrum disorder, but whatever little I understand, I'll share. Uh, First of all, it it's a spectrum, right? So depending upon spectrum, it means it is not zero and one. You can have autism, and that's true with most any disability, right? It's a range, and depending upon the level of disorder, disability, or a condition, uh, they interact with the environment differently. For a person who has autism, what works for them is simple instruction. Yeah, one sentence, one instruction. If you give them two instruction and one sentence, they will get confused. Yeah. Uh, Keep the environment simple. Some of them are sensitive to certain sensory situations. For example, if it is too noisy a place, they are not able to cope with that environment. Or if it is too flashy and or too bright environment, some of them might get disturbed by that. Many have a very different level of quality, even from the autism spectrum group. They are amazing in terms of understanding the repetitive process. They are very detail oriented. Yeah, uh, the kind of micro observation they have. Uh, I had happened to meet a person with autism. Uh, that person was a painter. One painting, he could have 260 patterns, and for most of us, it would look as the same. Yeah, so the kind of intricate work they are able to do, many of them, I mean, we cannot generalize, depends upon the where they stand on the spectrum. Uh, the kind of complexity they can understand is brilliant. And so for them to include, again, it's a neurodiversity. Again, it's another form of diversity, right? Keep things simple, keep an calm environment. uh, for kids, ensure uh, that you don't demean them because they are not, their social skills are different from ours. Yeah, for us, when we interact, we have our own way of interacting, but they have their own way of interacting. They will not understand sarcasm. Yeah, rules need to be written, and they'll follow the rules. Yeah, unwritten rules, it becomes difficult for them to follow. Yeah, so express instructions. Don't leave anything unexpressed. And that's when they'll be able to follow better. And there are organization who do deeper work on autism. Do take them. They can still do a lot of things, and in fact, they can do great things with autism, provided they get right assistance and support at the right time. Hope that answers.
Yeah, I think you did cover it well. The
Yeah.
next question is, how do you manage your social life?
Hmm, good question. I'm glad somebody asked because many don't even think a person with disability actually has fun. Okay, so In terms of socialization, again, um, I use my screen reader to find places, be it a restaurant, be it I love nature. So if I have to go out somewhere, I use Google search like any of you. I use maps like any of you to go to the right place. I use some of these cab aggregators. Some of them have put in effort to make, for example, Ola, Uber apps accessible, although they're not 100% there, but they have put in efforts. And in terms of interaction, I may have difficulty interacting, identifying individuals, yeah, unless you recognize the voice, and it takes a few conversations to recognize and identify voice. So where you can help is identify yourself initially for the time they recognize. Ensure when you go out in a restaurant with a person with disability, the place is accessible. There are restaurants who actually highlight that it's an accessible. For example, if a person is on wheelchair, there is a ramp for them to get in. Uh, the physical environment for a person on wheelchair or using crutches is very critical. Yeah? So the physical environment needs to be accessible. Uh, for a person with again visual impairment, if it is a too noisy or dark area, it becomes difficult to converse. So you could choose a place accordingly. I have fun in my own ways. I love nature, as I said, and I had a mountaineering experience when I joined Tata Motors. Uh, I was sent for a non-boarding program, and it was a trek in the Himalayas. And the HR asked me, Vishal, would you want to go? I said, yes, of course I want to go. I had no clue how I would climb, but without trying, how would I say no? So I said, I want to go. And the very first uh, trek that we had, we just had to go from the road to the base camp where our tents were put up. It took us 3 hours, and after we finished the entire course, the same route took us 20 minutes. That's how I started. Yeah, so my colleagues would describe what angle, what height, what's there in front of me, and that's how I started. I would fall 20, 30 times a day. Then I soon realized I am going to fall anyways. Better learn how to fall safely at least. So that was the first thing I learned. How do you fall safely so that you don't get hurt because you have to still climb? And for the next few days, I started to balance my body irrespective of the terrain. Remember, I wouldn't know at what angle the next step is going to be, whether it is a rolling stone, slippery mud, what height it is. And over a period of time, I developed techniques, verbal and even non-verbal, because I realized even verbal conversation is too physically taxing. When you're climbing for 10 hours a day with those 15 kgs rucksack on, it's difficult. Okay. Yeah, you can curse anybody you will remember. That's what we used to do. But that's the fun. Uh, when you finish that journey, you feel that the kind of nature that you see on the mountain. I enjoyed it so much that I went on to do a basic mountaineering course from Nehru Institute of Mountaineering, and I went for a Everest-based camp trek. It was a 16-day trek. Took me 10 days to climb up, 3 days to come down, and 3 days we got stranded. Yeah, because of the bad weather. Uh, we got stuck there, but the experience was amazing. Stretching myself. One of the reasons why I did was, of course, the love of being closer to nature. but also was to put myself out of comfort zone. Yeah, if I stretch myself to those scenarios, I would learn how to utilize my senses better, because that's the most unstructured environment that you can imagine, and it really blew a different personality out of me. And till today, I wouldn't forget some of those experiences. Yeah, so anything you learn, anything you start off with, it always feels difficult. Uh, be it a course, be it a situation, and that's when you need to be resilient and strong, focused. Because as you go along, you will discover ways, and you will discover yourself, your own qualities, which you will be able to apply in many other scenarios. Yeah, so yeah, I deviated a bit. Hopefully, it did answer definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, that was nice. We have a follow-up question on what you talked about, how help make Ola and Uber apps more accessible. The question is, can you talk about how Ola, Uber have made it accessible and what efforts can be put to make it better in terms of accessibility?
Okay. Ola, I had initiated a conversation with Ola few years ago, and they were very supportive to explore in making the app accessible. So they made the entire uh, those days, yeah, because it also comes with a lot of updates. The entire booking cycle accessible, so that the entire uh, experience is simpler to use. Uh, they realized the importance so much that they went on to hire a person from Stanford to lead the accessibility project along with a few other things, right? That shows the business value of including people with disabilities, which they recognized, and they continue to work towards it in many ways. Uh, what Uber did, in my understanding, is come up with so you see different types of rides. Yeah, so there is one more option called Uber Assist, wherein the cab aggregators, those cab drivers are trained on interacting and serving a person with disability. Even those cabs are wheelchair friendly, uh, and I'm told it's an inclusive experience overall. Yeah, so some of those are some of the things that they've tried. How it transforms life, to give you a perspective. Many women with disabilities were not are not let go easily, right? Even within the city, the moment because public transport is not that accessible, and it's in certain areas not safe enough. These cab aggregators and some of these solutions have actually made it inclusive. Imagine a person having a transport from door to door, right? So that they're able to go out on their own safely. For them, it's not just travel, it takes care of their basic needs of, be it education, employment, or social needs. Yeah, so when you make a product accessible, it impacts beyond that particular product. It transforms their life. Yeah, so what can be improved is to have more understanding of different requirements of different types of disabilities, and ensure the updates that come in also are made accessible. Sometimes some of the applications, I'm not talking of these two particularly, many apps who start with the journey of making accessible, when they come up with updates, they tend to forget including that in those updates, right? So it shouldn't be a afterthought. Accessibility should be baked in right from the beginning, right from the design phase. That's when it's cost effective and easier to construct.
Great. I think we have time for one last question. How can social media platforms be more inclusive and accessible? What are the steps they've taken and what can be done?
Okay. There are two sides of social media. Yeah, the platform itself being inclusive and accessible, or creating that enabling environment for users to create accessible social media content. Most of these popular social media have, to an extent, thought of disability. Uh, at least I'm aware of Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter having some effort in making those tools accessible. Yeah, so when you go to Instagram, for example, or LinkedIn post, you get an option of alternate text. Yeah, when you post an image, it gives you an option of alternate text. Next time, when you post a picture, do describe what is there in the picture. Yeah, you are smiling with a nice scenic background. That description helps a person with screen reader understand what you're doing. Yeah, otherwise, that particular image is of no use for that individual. Yeah, so what those social media has done is create that enabling environment for you to make your posts accessible. Even when you communicate, ensure you describe the images along with it. Uh, if it is a video, make sure you include captioning. Yeah, of course, if you're sharing a different, uh, if a video is created by somebody else, you could just sensitize, and that's where you can make a lot of difference. Do we talk about inclusion of disability? Do we talk of accessibility in our posts? That is where you can contribute. Just simple 2 minutes task. When you hear of a situation where it is not inclusive or accessible, or if you suggest if there is a product that is relevant for people with disabilities, you could suggest them to make it accessible on social media, and that becomes a voice because many people with disabilities still do not have access to technology for whatever reasons. Can you be the voice of those individuals? Yeah, many people with disabilities are uh, projected in a negative way. Yeah, in through ads, through comments. Make sure you defend those because it's also encouraging certain negative perceptions which needs to be uh, changed. Yeah, so a simple line there makes a lot of difference in changing somebody's mindset. Yeah, so don't think it's just a line, it's just a like, or it's just a share. uh, it actually changes mindset when all of us get together in changing that mindset. Yeah, so it all starts with having an open mindset, and social media is one of those tools you could start with. Thank you. Hope you had a productive day, and I'm sure there are a lot that you can take away. If it's one thing that you would want to take away, explore a little about whatever you create. How can you be more inclusive and accessible? Yeah, be it a document, website, application, or an experience that you create from now. Back to you, Anshi.
Thank you so much, Vishal, for this amazing session. You have definitely given us a lot to think about. Thank you so much for taking out time for this. I had a great time interacting with you. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this session. Before you leave, I would like to tell you about the podcast by LookUp India. So it's called Look Up, Not Down. It's a podcast where we talk about how you can lead a healthy relationship with your technology. And you can check it out and join us on our journey with several youth experts and advocates to cover domains like digital overload, fake news, mindfulness, ethical technology, and technology for good, and much more. It's available on all major platforms. I will share the link in the chat box, and you can also connect with Lookup India. I've shared the links for the same. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for this great session, Vishal.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Look Up India, and the entire team for organizing these sessions. Helps a lot in transforming many lives and changing a few mindsets. Thank you so much, and hope you had a good time.
Hello, sir. Hi. I just want to say one last line that this talk was really inspiring, and you just don't manage your life; you rather rock your life and inspire us all. And I feel people with impairity shouldn't be called disabled, rather differently able, because you all are unique in any and every way. And I would love to implement all the good points you said, not in just my future projects, but also in our lives. So thank you so
That's
much for the
great.
talk.
That's great. Thank you so much. What's your name?
My name is Shubhi.
Shobhi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I'm glad to hear from you. And yes, people with disabilities are in many forms able. It's
Differently
about
abled.
us to recognize whatever word we use differently able, challenge, impairment.
Hmm.
It's about what we think about them. Thank you so much.